Hi, my name's Rebecca and I've just decided to start a YouTube channel because we're in lockdown and I don't really have anything else to do. So here I am. This channel's basically just going to be on conspiracies because I love conspiracy theories and I've always wanted to talk about them. So here I am talking about them. So the first one that we're going to look at today is the assassination of JFK. So I've seen so many videos and so many theories and conspiracies and stuff like that about this. So I'm just going to start with some background kind of knowledge. So John F. Kennedy was President of the United States and he was assassinated on the 22nd of November 1963 in Dallas, Texas. He was sitting in a car driving through the motorcade in Dallas, Texas. He was struck by 2 bullets and the second one was fatal, and this was to the head. Governor John B. Connolly Jr. was also in the car and he was hit by a bullet but he survived. The assassination was recorded by Abraham Zapruder, hence why it's called the Zapruder video. The shooting occurred at the 6th floor window of the southeast corner of the Texas Schoolbook Depository building. Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested for the murder of JFK. 2 days after the assassination, Lee Harvey Oswald was killed by Jack Ruby. This was at the Dallas Police Department and he was being transferred to a higher security prison. This shooting was broadcasted on live TV. The route that JFK was taking was quite a strange route because there were so many turns in it, so it caused the motorcade to kind of slow down. The route was chosen by Winston G. Lawson and Forrest V. Sorrells, who were both Secret Service agents. The Secret Service agents that inspected the route found that there was over 20,000 windows on the route, and they inspected none of these windows because they didn't have enough men to inspect them and go through every single window, so they just didn't inspect any of them. 1 week after the assassination, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson took over as president and he formed a commission called the Warren Commission to find out what actually happened to JFK. So now we're going to get into some of the theories. So the first person that we're going to look at is Lee Harvey Oswald himself. So he's the guy that was arrested for the murder. So I'm going to look at why, first of all, people believe that he's guilty and kind of look into that a bit more. So it's believed that Oswald acted alone and that there was no conspiracy by the Warren Commission, which is the commission that Lyndon B. Johnson formed to kind of find out what happened to JFK. So they did loads of research. So Oswald kind of had ties to Russia. So he was in Russia in 1959. He tried to renounce his American citizenship, which kind of made him more connected to Russia than to America. Oswald also had a history of violence. He even chased his half-brother with a knife when he was younger, so that's great. Oswald also spent 3 years in the Marine Corps, where he gained the qualification of a sharpshooter with an M1 rifle. Oswald was under active surveillance by the FBI in Dallas. The Warren Commission also quoted saying, quote, "The Mannlicher Carcano 6.5mm Italian rifle from which the shots were fired was owned by and in the possession of Oswald," end quote. The statement's proved as there was a full bullet found on Connolly's stretcher, so the governor that was riding in the car with JFK. There was bullet fragments also that matched the gun. The rifle was also found hidden near the 6th floor window of the Texas Schoolbook Depository building. This is where Oswald worked, and there was 3 bullet cartridges as well found with the rifle. The Warren Commission's evidence found that, quote, "Oswald had attempted to kill Major General Edwin A. Walker on April 10th, 1963, thereby demonstrating his disposition to take human life," end quote. 45 minutes after the assassination of JFK, Oswald shot and killed police officer J.D. Tippit. He shot him with a revolver. There was eyewitness testimony to this, and there was also bullet cartridges found matching the revolver. The Warren Commission were also very sure that it was Oswald that committed it. Oswald bought a rifle by mail order, and it was alleged that this was the weapon that was recovered from the Texas Schoolbook Depository building. In 2017, Donald Trump released 28,000 previously classified files about the JFK case to the public, and these files that were released showed that Oswald spoke to a member of the KGB assassination unit at the Soviet embassy. This was on the 28th of September 1963. He called the embassy also on the 1st of October, and he was speaking in Russian. So now we're going to look at why Oswald's believed to be not guilty. So, as said before, Oswald was under surveillance by the FBI, but the FBI didn't actually inform the Secret Service about this, so it's kind of suspicious, and it kind of leads you to believe that Oswald wasn't that dangerous, so he couldn't be... So, like, if he wasn't mentioned to the Secret Service, then he couldn't really be that dangerous and that involved in the whole situation. The Warren Commission also found no evidence that Jack Ruby or Lee Harvey Oswald were involved in a conspiracy to kill JFK. The Warren Commission also found, quote, no evidence that Oswald was involved with any person or group in a conspiracy to assassinate the president, end quote. So when examining the Zapruder video, which is the video of the assassination, it shows that in the video frames that there's not enough time for Oswald to have fired 2 shots, indicating that there might have been a second shooter. Another thing that's kind of suspicious is that Oswald didn't really have any motive to kill the president. If Oswald did actually kill JFK, then this is what he'd have to have done. He'd have had to run up 4 flights of stairs in the Texas Schoolbook Depository building, fire 3 bullets in 1.7 seconds, wipe the gun, lay bullet shells in a row, which is how they were found, run down 4 flights of stairs as the lift in the building was broken at that time, pass witnesses who didn't actually see him, and then go back to the lunchroom not out of breath and then leave. So when Oswald was being transferred to a higher security prison right before his death, he kept saying, quote, I'm just a patsy, and quote, I didn't shoot anybody. So a patsy means that he's being framed, he's been set up and he didn't do it. So there's a theory that Oswald actually defected to the Soviet Union and that the real assassin was a Russian agent, and the US government supposedly covered this up to prevent World War III. So it's common knowledge that Oswald was in the Texas Schoolbook Depository building when the shots were fired. However, in the Zapruder video, which I can leave a link to below, it shows JFK's head flying backwards, but if the shot had came from the Texas Schoolbook Depository building, then his head would have went forward. Because of the angle of the shot and where the building is in comparison to the car, his head would have went forwards instead of back. The gun that Oswald supposedly used was not a good gun, therefore it was nearly impossible to shoot a moving target with it. So in the Marines at this time there was 3 levels of shooting. There was a marksman, which was the lowest, a sharpshooter, and then an expert, which was the highest. Oswald was a marksman, so he was the lowest level of shooting at that time. Oswald was quite a poor shot as well. He took like tests when he was in the Marines and it showed that he was not as quite accurate with his shooting. Experts also tried to recreate the shot and they failed to do it, so it leads you to believe like how could a marksman do it if an expert couldn't? Harold Weisberg, who was an officer for the Strategic Services, a US Senate staff, an investigator and a reporter, he said that, quote, we have not been told the truth about Oswald, end quote. Oswald himself said, quote, I have no receipts for purchase of any gun, never possessed a rifle, end quote. Oswald's trial also went on for 12 hours and he wasn't allowed a lawyer. All notes and recordings of the trial were destroyed, which is quite suspicious and potentially a cover-up by someone. So now I'm going to be talking about the magic bullet. So the second shot was very suspicious. It's called the magic bullet because from the 6th floor window of the Texas Schoolbook Depository building, this bullet supposedly entered through JFK's neck, exiting downward and entering Connolly's right side of his back, exit below his right nipple, enter and exit through his right wrist, and then lodge itself into his left thigh. All in one shot with one bullet. It's also confirmed that the second bullet that was found was the bullet that was found on Connolly's stretcher, fully intact, after supposedly going through 2 different human beings. Apparently the magic bullet theory is possible if Connolly was sitting on a lower seat than JFK, and also considering their body positions. The Warren Commission also believe though that the magic bullet theory doesn't rule out the fact that Oswald could have done it. So Connolly actually also said, quote, "There is my absolute knowledge, and Nellie's too, that one bullet caused the president's first wound and that entirely separate shot struck me." End quote. So Nellie is his wife, who was riding in the car as well. There was also a spectator called James T. Tague, and he claimed that a stray bullet hit the pavement near him and that a fragment scratched him in the cheek. There was actually a mark in the pavement, and according to the Warren Commission, it, quote, "could have originated from the lead core of a bullet." End quote. So Tague claims that this bullet was the second shot and not the first one. In the 1970s there was new acoustic research, and this was used to analyse the shooting. It was found that there were 6 points in the audio that contain echo patterns that are similar to gunshots. There was also new footage of the grassy knoll found, and people that have seen this footage claim to see gun smoke coming from the grassy knoll, or even a second shooter. This footage unfortunately is missing. So in 2015 Cynthia Nix Jackson, who is the daughter of the man who took this video, sued the US government for $10 million for the return of the footage. The film hasn't been seen since the House Select Committee on Assassinations in 1978. So the House Select Committee on Assassinations was formed in 1976 to conduct an investigation on the assassination of JFK and Martin Luther King. So the committee was formed after the confirmation that the CIA purposefully withheld information from the Warren Commission. This information included plots to assassinate Fidel Castro, who was the Prime Minister of Cuba at the time. The committee said that it was highly likely that there was 2 shooters because of acoustical evidence. A quote from the committee states that, quote, "The committee believes, on the basis of the evidence available to it, that President John F. Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy. The committee is unable to identify the other gunmen or the extent of the conspiracy." End quote. So now we're going to talk about Lyndon B. Johnson and why he is believed to be guilty and why he's believed to not be guilty. So Lyndon B. Johnson was the Vice President and obviously took over as President after JFK's assassination. Lyndon B. Johnson was believed by many to have had JFK assassinated for political gain. So before Kennedy was even elected as President, Johnson attempted to take the Democratic nomination from JFK at the 1960 convention in Los Angeles. There was also rumours going about at the time that Johnson would be dropped from the election the following year. The day before JFK's assassination, JFK and Johnson had fought and argued. Johnson also played a big part in JFK actually going to Dallas in the first place. JFK went to Dallas to solve the political problem in Texas at the time. Johnson also no longer had control over Texas, and Texas was a vital place for JFK to be re-elected next year. Johnson's right-hand man was also warned by a high-profile lawyer named Byron Skelton that the political climate in Dallas wasn't actually safe and that he feared for the president's safety, but JFK wasn't informed of this. There was also a woman called Madeleine Brown, and she had an affair with Johnson. She claimed to attend a party with Lyndon B. Johnson, Richard Nixon and J. Edgar Hoover. So if you don't know who these people are, J. Edgar Hoover was the first director of the FBI and Richard Nixon was JFK's opponent in the 1960 election. She apparently attended this party the night before JFK's assassination. At this party she claimed that Johnson whispered into her ear, quote, "After tomorrow those Kennedys will never embarrass me again. That's no threat, that's a promise." End quote. So now we're going to talk about how he's not guilty. So in the book Death of a President, it's shown that Johnson asked JFK to continue his job as Texas Senator. This shows that he didn't really like Vice President, he didn't like the responsibilities, potentially didn't like the power, but that's debatable. So it kind of leads you to believe, why would he want JFK killed? If he knows that he as Vice President is going to take JFK's place as President, why would he want that responsibility if he just wanted to go back to being Texas Senator? So also the previous exchange at the party that was mentioned with Madeleine Brown actually couldn't have happened. So the night before the assassination, Johnson was on the trip to Texas and his movements were heavily monitored as well. There's also nothing to support the theory that he had anything to do with JFK's assassination. In a survey taken, it shows that 20% of Americans believe that Lyndon B. Johnson was responsible for JFK's assassination. So it's kind of up to you and what you interpret with the whole thing, but 20% of Americans to me kind of sounds like not that much. You could have a lot more believing that he was involved. So now we're going to look at the Russians and why the Russians could be involved and why they're guilty and why they're not guilty. So first of all, there was tension between both the nations, America and Russia, after the Cold War. Oswald tried to live in the Soviet Union, and so he could have been a KGB agent, perhaps. Oswald was also at the Russian embassy a few weeks before the assassination, potentially plotting. The USSR was also concerned that the US could launch a missile strike, and according to an FBI report, the Soviet leaders feared irresponsible action by the generals in absence of leadership at the top. So now we're going to look at why the Russians are not guilty. Oswald wouldn't have been the best option for the Russians to choose for this mission because he had such strong ties to Russia, and so it would have made them look pretty suspicious. The Russians apparently also considered Oswald to be a, quote, neurotic maniac, end quote, and possibly part of a right-wing conspiracy. So if they didn't really like Oswald, then why would they choose him? And also he does have Russian ties, so why would the Russians choose Oswald to do this? And I don't think any Russian agent would have done this either. So now we are going to look at the mafia and why they could be guilty and not guilty. So after JFK's assassination, there were reporters and other people that kind of knew more about the situation than the majority of people. They were all murdered, as well as anybody who had interviewed Jack Ruby, who we previously mentioned that shot Oswald. So Jack Ruby was a supposed member of the mafia. There was many mafia members that came to his nightclub. The Hollywood chief mafia member Johnny Roselli was actually dismembered after saying, quote, "Jack Ruby is our boy," end quote. So it's believed that he was part of the mafia, but it was never confirmed. Jack Ruby supposedly killed Oswald to cover up the truth, linking this whole thing to the mafia. So the mafia also previously tried to kill JFK, but failed as he was warned both times. Possibly the mafia's main motive is that they wanted to kill JFK's brother Robert Kennedy. So Robert Kennedy was completely against the mafia and wanted to stop them, but they couldn't really kill Robert with JFK still alive, as JFK being president would, you know, probably suspect it's the mafia, find out it's the mafia, and then destroy the mafia. So then nearly 5 years after JFK's assassination, Robert Kennedy himself was assassinated on the 6th of June 1968. He got him out the way, and then they did what they actually wanted to do. Also in 2015, an imprisoned mafia hitman called James Files claimed to be the second shooter in the killings. He claimed that he was part of a plot in collaboration with the mafia and the CIA. Now we're going to look at the reasons why the mafia is not guilty. So there's speculation that the mafia couldn't have actually had the president assassinated themselves, as they didn't have enough power at the time. They could have influenced other people to get this done, but they themselves couldn't have done it at this time. They just didn't have enough power. So as stated before, the imprisoned mafia hitman claimed that he was the second shooter. However, there's no evidence supporting this. So now we're going to look at the mob and why the mob are guilty and not guilty. So basically the difference between the mob and the mafia, they're kind of like similar, but the mob, there was 3 different mob groups involved for this. And the mob's kind of more central to a city kind of location than like the mafia or like Italian. There were 3 different mob groups who all claimed responsibility for the assassination of JFK. These groups included the Chicago mob, the Miami mob and the New Orleans mob. So as Attorney General Robert Kennedy, JFK's brother, made moves against organised crime, potentially angering these mobs. Some people believe that the mob were working with the CIA to kill JFK. JFK also had ties to the head of the Chicago mob, San Giancana. In 1975, Giancana was supposed to testify about his role in a CIA assassination plot to a Senate committee, but he was then assassinated himself, potentially to keep him quiet by the mob. So JFK's father also worked with Giancana in the bootlegging business during the Prohibition. So those of you that don't know what the Prohibition is, it's basically like in America when they banned all the alcohol sales. So there's also rumours that Giancana actually helped JFK to win the 1960 election in the first place. So that kind of leads you to believe, like, why would he want to kill him if he was his friend? So now we're going to be talking about the CIA and why the CIA are guilty and not guilty. So Alan Jules was the former head of the CIA, and he was also on the Warren Commission. It's believed that JFK found out that the CIA had a plot to kill Fidel Castro, as I mentioned before. The CIA also felt threatened that JFK had a different agenda and wanted to disband the CIA. Forensic historian Patrick Nolan actually wrote a book called CIA Rogues and the Killing of the Kennedys. In this book he theorises that 4 high-level agents planned the shooting and 3 agents fired 4 shots during the assassination. People believe that the CIA chose Oswald to carry out the shooting as he was a known communist and a Russian sympathiser. After the failed Bay of Pigs invasion into Cuba, if you don't know about that, basically the Americans wanted to invade Cuba just before the Cold War. So after the Bay of Pigs invasion, there were personnel changes in the CIA under Kennedy, which potentially could have upset them. During the Bay of Pigs invasion also, JFK refused to offer additional US military support, despite the CIA offering, quote, an umbrella of air protection, end quote. Returning back to Giancana, he was assassinated just before testifying about his role in a CIA assassination plot. So they were potentially covering up their involvement by killing him before he could spill their secrets. JFK also wanted to get rid of the CIA. He actually quoted saying that he wanted to, quote, splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it into the wind, end quote. So basically he didn't really like them that much. A local British newspaper called the Cambridge Evening News was warned in advance of the actual assassination. An anonymous caller phoned in telling the reporter to call the US Embassy for some, quote, big news. This occurred 25 minutes before the assassination. There's also a theory that Oswald was being controlled by the CIA using MKUltra. So if you don't know what MKUltra is, it's basically a government program, like a mind control program that the government have. Another theory actually involves George H.W. Bush. It theorises that he was involved in the plot to assassinate JFK as he was rewarded by being the head of the CIA 10 years after the assassination. So referring back to the Bay of Pigs invasion, the word umbrella in that quote is interesting as it provides the theory that Oswald potentially acted with a CIA operative called the Umbrella Man, but we'll get to that in a second. So let's now talk about how the CIA are not guilty. So basically everything that I've said is plausible, but most of the evidence that the CIA were actually involved in the JFK assassinations were just theories, and there's very little hard evidence and actual proof. There's a lot of hard evidence that they didn't like each other or they didn't get on, but there's not hard evidence that they actually carried out the assassination. So now we're going to talk about the Umbrella Man as mentioned before, and how he's guilty and not guilty. In the Zapruder video and other videos and photos of the day, you can see a man holding an umbrella above his head. This is really strange as it wasn't raining, it was actually a really sunny day and nobody else in the crowd had an umbrella. It's also suspicious as JFK was struck by the first shot right as the car that he was in passed by the Umbrella Man. Many people also that have seen footage and have been there and witnessed the day also believe that the Umbrella Man lifted his umbrella a foot or so above where he was already holding it, just as the car was passing. This is him supposedly signalling a gunman. So there's another theory altogether that the actual umbrella that he's holding was believed to be a weapon that fires darts. So Charles Sensony was a Department of Defense weapons developer, and he testified to the Senate Intelligence Committee that a form of this umbrella weapon that's been discussed exists as he designed it himself. Sensony described an umbrella-like weapon that could fire darts silently. The author Jim Mars also claimed that the darts were fired through the umbrella's webbing when it was opened. There are pictures of the event showing the umbrella closed before and after the assassination, but during the assassination the umbrella was opened. After the shooting as well, which is quite suspicious, all spectators fled, but the umbrella man and another unknown man sat down on the curb next to each other. The umbrella man was revealed to be a man called Louis Stephen Witt. It was also confirmed that the umbrella weapon could kill somebody because a writer named George Markov was killed in 1928 by this very weapon. So now we're going to talk about how the umbrella man is not guilty. So Louis Stephen Witt testified to a Senate committee and brought his umbrella with him. So he claimed that the umbrella was actually a signal of protest to Joseph Kennedy, JFK's father. So Witt wasn't happy with Joseph Kennedy's appeasement policies when Joseph was an ambassador to the court of St. James in 1938 to 1939. I know that's a lot, and I'm going to explain. So basically Joseph believed that Hitler could actually be appeased, unlike other people such as Neville Chamberlain at the time. So this was like back in 1939. So Joseph actually met up with a Nazi and had a discussion with him about how they could stall the war, and money was also involved. So in protest to this, Witt used an umbrella to reference former Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, who promoted appeasement. So he was against the Nazis and he was against Hitler. So throughout history in England and America, umbrellas have actually been used as signs of protest at this time. Witt explained that he only opened the umbrella when he thought that JFK could see it. He also explained that the umbrella blocked his view of the shooting, so that's why he was calm after the event and he sat on the curb. Now we're going to talk about the FBI. So the local FBI didn't inform the Secret Service that Oswald was under active surveillance, as I said before, so this is kind of suspicious. So after Oswald's death, the FBI actually visited the morgue and they spent an extremely long time in there. And this was very suspicious as they actually told nobody working in the morgue that they were going to examine the body. It's believed by many people that they were putting Oswald's fingerprints on the gun, as the same day after they'd left the morgue they found Oswald's fingerprints on the gun. So now we're going to talk about how they're not guilty. So again, most of the theories that the FBI were involved are just theories and there's not much solid evidence. Now we're going to talk about the Secret Service. So the Secret Service are believed to be guilty because there was one theory that was aired on a TV and in books. So the theory suggests that a motorcade Secret Service agent shot Kennedy by accident from the car behind. A policeman claimed that it was the agent's first time in a follow car and that he had an unfamiliar weapon and it went off when the car suddenly stopped, or it was in reaction to the first shot. This allegation was supposedly covered up by Johnson and Robert Kennedy. The theory was strongly denied by the agent. William Greer, who was a Secret Service agent and the driver of the vehicle, heard the shot and actually slowed down instead of speeding up, which is completely against protocol. He actually received a gold medal for keeping calm under fire. The Secret Service also didn't tell the FBI about the chosen route. The Secret Service were also not following protocol on the day of the murder. Normally they would do the wedge position, which protects JFK from all sides, but they didn't, therefore he was left unprotected. After the shooting, JFK was also taken to Parkland Memorial Hospital in Dallas, where he was pronounced dead. At 2 p.m, the Secret Service took his body away to Air Force One. So this is illegal, and the doctors that worked in the hospital were very strongly against it and they put up a fight about it. Also, people that took photos of JFK's body and did the autopsy were on record saying that the photos available for the public are actually not the photos that were taken during the autopsy. People also gave statements to reporters and they realised that the things that they had said were changed. So also going back to the driver, there was somebody that ran out in front of bullets to save JFK and told Jackie to get down. He only got a silver medal, unlike the driver who got a gold. Again, most of the theories are just speculation about the Secret Service. A 2003 ABC News poll conducted 40 years after the assassination that 70% of Americans actually believe there was a plot behind the killing. 32% accepted the Warren Commission's findings that it was Oswald and there was only one shooter. 51% believed that there was a second gunman involved. So in 1973, Johnson told The Atlantic, quote, "I never believed that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, although I can accept that he pulled the trigger," end quote. So I personally believe that Oswald had nothing to do with it. He's not innocent. Like, he did kill J.D. Tippett, he killed a policeman and, you know, but I don't think he killed the president. I don't think he could have killed the president. I think that the American government were very suspicious. I think it kind of has to be the American government. So that's my video done. I hope you enjoyed this video and hopefully want to see more, because who knows how long we're going to be in quarantine for. So if you have any video suggestions, any other conspiracies you want me to do, then leave a comment down below. Also, if you want to subscribe, then you can subscribe and click the wee bell to get notified whenever I post. I hope you learned something from this. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will hopefully post something soon.